Monday get together for 365 Mac. And if there's any reason to hit that like button, it better be Brandon Lee Gowton from Bleeding Green Nation joining us. Look at that happy smiling face. How can you not like that? Go ahead, hit that like button right now. BLG, how you be?
I'm doing great. How you guys doing?
Doing well, Brandon, except I can't figure out why. I can figure out, as I was telling Jody in our opening segment, look, I get the contracts for Rashad Penny and Justin Evans and Nicholas Morrow and Greedy Williams. Terrell Edmonds, man, he's 26, starts for a really good defense at times for 5 years. That's the guy typically you want to pay in free agency. He's got a pretty good PFF grade. What the heck are we missing? Why is this guy not making any money?
It's actually less than he would have made, last year with the Steelers when, in theory, he had less leverage at the time because he was out there on the market until basically like right before the draft. And the Steelers were like, okay, even though we declined your fifth-year option, we'll bring you back because we couldn't find something better we liked. And based on the sense that I got from reading some things in terms of Steelers coverage, they thought he would be back this year on another kind of one-year deal and navigate through that again. But he's not. So I think it was a little bit of a surprise that he ended up going to Philadelphia instead. I think he's a solid player. And again, you look at the age, and that's nice. He clearly hasn't stood out in a way of making plays. And you would think teams put value on that. So I guess that's the kind of the knock against him.
All right. Do you think that perchance one of the reasons why he's here in Philadelphia now is he thinks the Steelers squeezed him, had a chance to pick up the fifth-year option passed, brought him back, but like you said, later into free agency, didn't get a great deal last year, only $2 million and change. So he said, well, if they come at me with that same $2 million, screw them. I'm going somewhere else. I know they drafted me, but they haven't really taken care of me over 5 years. So let me take the next best available offer, which may very well have been the Philadelphia Eagles. But again, back to Johnny's question, is safety so devalued? We talk so much about running back being devalued in the National Football League. Is safety there too? Did we all overestimate how much safeties could get paid? Like a Chauncey Gardner, who we thought was going to be over $10 million and settled for 6 and change and incentives that takes it to 8. Has the NFL just gotten into a mode where safeties are safeties and we're not paying for them?
And some of the incentives in that Chauncey Gardner-Johnson contract where it's not even up to him. It's up to team success of the pass defense ranks 16th or higher, which is, I think, just a really bad contract, honestly. I mean, that's not even in his control to some extent. I think it's clear other than Jesse Bates, who got paid top of the market money.
One guy, right, exactly.
Yeah. Yep, just the one guy, top of the market money, okay. But after that, no, wasn't the safety market was not there. I think there's multiple reasons why that's true. I think part of it's just that there's still talent out there. There's a surplus of talent.
Yeah, it's pretty deep at the position overall in free agents.
John Johnson's still out there. He was he was a top of the market player a couple years ago. I know maybe he didn't quite work out with the Browns exactly how they wanted to, but he wasn't, I don't think, an awful player by any means. I think it's, a buyer's market at that position.
This will be near and dear to Jody's heart because I'm going to bring up his favorite player. And by the way, when I'm talking about Terrell Edmonds, I'm not talking about $8 million. I'm talking like $4 or $5 million. I'm saying as a 5-year starter, 26. Is there some Derek Barnett type stuff going on in Pittsburgh? Because when you're a first round pick, and he shouldn't have been, he was overdrafted according to most people. But when you're labeled a first round pick, you're a first round pick forever. And expectations are you're going to play a first-round pick. You're going to play like a first-round pick. And as you mentioned, BLG, he's not a splash player guy. So that's the difference between him and CJ. It's just sound, pretty much, from what I read. Consistent, but no splash plays. You think that factors into it?
Yeah, I mean, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson had 6 interceptions last year, led the NFL. Terrell Edmonds
he's got 5 in 5 years.
In 75 games, started 79, played total, and then doesn't have a career forced fumble. Again, like that's not really what you want to see I think those numbers are kind of important to look at. It might seem like oversimplifying, but for like safeties and linebackers, you want to see big plays made, and you're not really getting that so much out of him. That's not what it's all about, I think, or the only thing it has to be about. I think you can have a solid player, a guy who can come in and be a reasonable starter. I mean, look at Marcus Epps. Marcus Epps last year did not have an interception, if I'm not mistaken. He was not necessarily a splash player as much as I would say kind of a good run defender. Yeah, he didn't have an interception, and he only had 6 passes defense. He did have a forced fumble, but certainly that was not his calling card last year as much as maybe his tackling and his run defense. So I think that's kind of what the Eagles got here. They got a Marcus Epps replacement in Terrell Edmunds. It's not someone who you're expecting to make the Pro Bowl, but he can be a solid starter. I mean, you know, to speak to your Derek Barnett point, John, I think that's absolutely right. Although the one thing that differentiates them is that Derek Barnett hasn't been able to stay healthy, and Edmunds has barely missed any time at all.
Right. They're in their actual ability to stay on the field. Kind of key to be a football player. You got to be on the field. Edmunds certainly has been better than Derek Barnett. All right. I saw this laid out this way, and it kind of jumped out at me today, so I need your reaction, DLG, and John, you too. When you look at it this way, it doesn't look as great. We're giving the Eagles credit for signing a talented player for a less expensive deal and maybe opening their thought process and horizons on how to deploy safeties this year. So we're giving the Eagles credit, but then you take a step back, take the 2000 view look. Eagles additions this year from outside the organization: Edmunds, Evans, Greedy Williams, Morrow, Rashad Penny, and Marcus Mariota.
Mm-hmm.
Put them on one side of the scale. Then here are the free agents the Eagles have lost: Hargrave, White, Edwards, CJGJ, FC,
Kaiser White.
I said Kaiser White.
Okay.
Miles Sanders, Andre Dillard, Gardner Minshew, Isaac Seumalo. Yeah, that doesn't quite balance the scales just yet, does it? Here's the Eagles have added. Here's what the Eagles have lost. Yeah, this side is winning. Have the Eagles done enough this offseason? Have they just gotten, as I like to call them, Jags, just another guy, to fill in for guys that they're missing, whereas they lost players who were more than just Jags?
I think the way they would say it is you have to look at the players they retained too. And I think that's fair, not just saying like that's their own spin, but that's part of what they would say is in the equation. They were able to keep James Bradberry. They were able to retain, work things out basically with Darius Slay. I'm not the biggest fan of the Fletcher Cox returning deal, but they would point out that as well. So Brendan Graham, Jason Kelsey. So, you know, that's part of the equation. Part of it was that also, again, these losses were inevitable to some extent. And for as much as some people might want to say like the salary cap isn't real, I mean, this is a very this is a lot of proof that it is real, because you can't just pay everyone. And you have to kind of go cheaper at some spots in the position the Eagles are in, because their roster is so good and they already have a lot of money tied up, and also a lot of money tied up in, through void years and whatnot that has kind of catching up to them. The financial flexibility they've kind of counted on in the past, you're looking at 54.7 in dead money this season. So that's just kind of the reality of the situation they're in. I think they've done a decent job navigating the path that they've had. But yeah, I mean, certainly when you look at those names that you added, you're not, not getting super fired up about it.
No. You mentioned some of the names they kept, though, and certainly it's a group of very, very accomplished players, very, very good players, also very, very old players by NFL standards. BLG. Howie has said pretty consistently coming off the 2017 Super Bowl season that he learned some lessons about loyalty and about being too loyal and things like that. And then he turns around and he's pretty loyal to the guys, the foundational guys, certainly the core 4 guys. We live in Philadelphia. I tell Jody all the time, in many ways, I think Sam Hinkie broke Philadelphia, because everybody's always thinking about the future. I don't know why you're thinking about the future when you're 10 seconds away from, you're tied in the Super Bowl. The window is clearly open for this team, even with those losses. Do you have a problem with Howie sticking with all these over 30 guys?
I think when you look at on a case-by-case basis, I mean, Jason Kelsey is all-pro again. He's the best player at his position in the league. Brandon Graham's coming off a career season. You look at guys like that, why wouldn't you bring them back? Like, they're not showing signs of decline. They're looking great, and they're staying healthy. When you look at someone like Fletcher Cox, I have a tougher time with that one. Darius Slay, I thought he didn't necessarily play his best football down the stretch. So in those cases, I'm a little bit more worried because I wonder what's next. And even if it's not Slay, the fact that you signed James Bradberry, who's entering his age 30 season, and you have Darius Slay, you have two cornerbacks, 30 plus. It just seems like the likelihood of one of those players declining at a position where I think decline kind of hits sooner, or at least has the potential to, based on the traits of that position, that worries me a little bit in that sense. But I like the Bradberry deal, so I'm not really going to complain so much about him. I do think it's, again, if we talk about the things that you put in the pro column, the con column, that's one of them. But I think the situation the Eagles were in, it wasn't like they could, all right, we're going to let all of these older guys walk, and now we're going to sign, these younger guys in free agency, because there's a price to be paid for that. The younger guys are getting the premium contract.
Well, you also got to pay the quarterback,
and that too.
Yeah.
So I just don't think they could necessarily afford to totally overturn the roster. I think, again, you kind of have to go with case by case basis on that.
All right, specific case basis for you. They miss out on signing Bobby Wagner. Goes back to Seattle, 1-year deal, $7 million. I guess Howie's got like a $3 million cap that he can't pay anybody more than $3 million on the free agent market. You make over $3 million. No, sorry. Hang up the phone. And that's the way it's played so far. But Wagner, again, had a great season for the Rams and a very forgettable season for the Rams in his 1 year there, and has decided to go back to Seattle. They saw the value in bringing him back as their stopper linebacker and their leader on defense. Eagles miss out on an opportunity to get one of the best linebackers in the NFL.
I definitely thought they should have been keeping tabs on his market. I think he ended up making more than I think they should have paid, and what they realistically would have paid.
You weren't ready to go $7 million for Bobby Wagner.
No, I mean, you almost might as well just bring back TJ Edwards. I feel like if you're willing to pay that contract, I feel like you should be willing to pay the TJ Edwards contract.
Good point. Much younger player. Yeah. So I'd put $5 million at Bobby. I said I talk about it at $5 million. Would you have talked about it at $5 million?
Yeah, again, I wouldn't say just no automatically, but also you have to consider, and kind of like with TJ going to Chicago, you have to wonder, Bobby Wagner wanting to go back to Seattle, if you kind of have to outbid that price, because there's obviously an advantage in going back to where he was already.
Yeah, I mentioned ring shopping. That would have to be part of it, because I thought Bobby would get more than $5 million, so it would have to be both sides of the equation. Mm-hmm. He'd have to be going ring shopping, willing to pay for less money. And obviously it didn't work out. Linebacker as a whole, boy, they're awfully light at linebacker as we progress. Now they're going to add a body somewhere in the draft. It's obviously not going to be in the first round. Who knows? We still got June 1st coming. Howie makes a point of saying talent acquisition season goes right up to the trade deadline, really. And they did last year. You look at Linval and Ndamukong Suh, speaking of ring shopping. So there's a long time you can add pieces. But I got to tell you, Nakobe Dean and Nicholas Morrow, boy, I mean, can we just say we don't care about stopping the run whatsoever? Is that where we are in the NFL as a whole? Like Jordan Davis, go stop the run. That's your job.
Yeah. I definitely think that they're counting on the young guys, like you just mentioned, Nakobe Dean and Jordan Davis, to really step up. That's another part of this offseason. Again, that especially they would probably say to you, it's like, well, look, we lost these guys, but we also have picks from previous draft classes that have kind of been waiting in the wings and are ready to step up. So that's definitely something they're counting on. And at linebacker specifically, it's just not a spot where they're gonna, just like running back. And I think the Rashad Penny contract, the fact that he got $600K guaranteed, kind of speaks to this. Like, they're just not going to spend big resources in a position too, where, I mean, look, Penny's probably not going to be able to stay healthy. He hasn't ever done it in his career, but in theory, the upside of his signing is pretty good. It's pretty attractive. So, the fact that you can get a guy like that for $600K kind of speaks to why they're only going to spend so many resources on running back. And with linebacker, it's not exactly the same, but I just feel like that's the kind of position that they feel they just clearly don't need to put.
Now, with linebacker, though, let me just throw this into you and I have seen this. I mean, up close, they've done this time and time again. It usually doesn't work. It's usually Eric Wilson or Corey Nelson or LJ Ford, Paul Warlow. Yeah. I mean, they developed TJ Edwards into a good player. Kaiser White worked for what they wanted. I don't know. You think maybe there should have been a little bit inching up? And maybe you're right. Maybe TJ just wanted to play in Chicago. But, boy, I thought he was going to get more than that. It looked like a cost-effective contract to me. Kaiser, probably not happy with 2 years, so maybe that. But they should have learned from Eric Wilson. And that's guys they signed. Don't forget the Nate Garys of the world, who they tried to draft and develop. I mean, they've had far more misses at that position than hits.
Absolutely. And, I think Morrow is a reasonable signing. But you're right. I mean, they still have to do more. And Nakobe Dean, the thing about him is, I know a lot of people are excited, and I get it. But at the same time, the way I like to think about it is for as much excitement as there is about him, I feel like a lot of people would say that they're not necessarily devastated that TJ Edwards and Kaiser White are gone.
No.
And yet those were the guys that Nakobe Dean couldn't get on the field over last year. And I think there was the opportunity for him to do that in terms of if Nakobe Dean was really lighting it up in training camp and, basically made it impossible for the coaches to keep him off the field. I think he could have been on the field at least a little bit more than he was, which is basically not at all, except for garbage time. So, it's just hard to assume he's going to step in right away and be awesome from the jump.
Speaking of Nakobe, we lost Jody. Hopefully he'll pop back in here quickly. But it's kind of forgotten, BLG. When he fell in the draft, you remember there was talk about an injury as well as, if he's got some size deficiencies, that was probably part of it as well. But there was talk that, he had the shoulder injury. It might have been degenerative. You think that was part of the reason he didn't get in the mix, especially early? And by the time, the second half of the season came along, well, they were winning games. So you're not going to take TJ off the field. You're not going to take Kaiser off the field. Trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, because I'm with you. You know what's coming. And they were pretty solidly ahead in a number of games to where they could have mixed in some of these younger players a little bit more.
Yeah. My thing with it isn't that, he's definitely going to be bad as much as it's just like, sometimes there's a reason why guys fall in the draft. Doesn't mean it's always a good reason, but it's not like this inexplicable thing. Like, oh, how could these teams be so dumb? Nakobe Dean is a star. The Eagles pulled one over on the entire NFL. I mean, it's possible it plays out like that, but I don't think that's necessarily definitely the case. Again, I think there could be a reason that he falls, and it's not a good reason, but it's probably a reason. And I think, like you said, the size was definitely a factor in there. The injury thing was weird because we never saw any signs of that.
Yeah.
He never missed any time in training camp or the regular. I don't think he was on the injury report the whole year. So I don't think that really was an issue. But yeah, there's a lot of pressure on him to step up. And, look, I'm sure they're going to draft someone or add someone an undrafted free agency. Either, who knows? There's always a trade out there potentially waiting for you, especially with Howie Roseman involved. I guess the one thing I would push back on when it comes to Howie's point about, the offseason is long. I agree that, and last year's a great example that you can add talent at any point. But, what's the likelihood that you're going to add a Pro Bowl kind of caliber safety days before the season, or you're going to get an all-pro kind of corner like James Bradberry was last year that just gets cut by someone? It's not impossible. Yeah. But you certainly can't just bank on that.
Yeah, I think the assumption that it happened is going to happen again is not likely.
Right.
We always talk regression to the mean. I mean, Jody knows, like, I got killed for calling Howie a top 5 GM. I got murdered to the point where, now everyone loves him. And now it's a tipping point for me because everybody's like, well, Penny's going to work out. Morrow's going to work out. And Greedy Williams is going to. And I'm like, if one of these guys works out, you should be thrilled from my perspective.
As far as your point about Nakobe Dean and did everybody get it wrong and how he just kind of outsmarted everybody or did luck into it, don't care. I think the kid's going to be a star, and I do believe that the league got it wrong and how he was a little lucky enough, but smart enough as well to snag him when he did. Guys have been overlooked before in the draft and turned out. Aaron Donald should have been the #1 pick of the draft the year he came out. He was a little undersized. Oops, a whole bunch of teams missed on him. And, the Rams were able to grab him and get one of the best defensive players of all time. So it's not like it's unprecedented in the league. All right, speaking of defensive tackle, the Eagles lost both of their starting safeties, both of their starting linebackers, starting defensive tackle. They've signed a linebacker, and they're certainly going to plug Nakobe Dean in. They've signed 2 safeties. They haven't made any additions at the defensive tackle position yet. Is that next? Is there a name or two we should be keeping an eye on? Is this a given that this is going to be something they're going to address in the draft? I know we're just talking about, John continues to emphasize, it's an entire offseason. The roster building season goes to the trade deadline. Well, yeah, but someone's a little impatient and want to know, nobody's stepping in and replacing Javon Hargrave, but somebody's got to actually take those snaps and play those downs on the defensive line for the Eagles this year. When are we going to see an addition at defensive tackle? Or is it Marlon Tuipulotu? Is that it? Is the answer he's already on the roster and his name is Marlon Tuipulotu?
Marlon T, baby. People forget about him.
And then his brother's in the draft.
Yeah. Tui's supposed to be really good. Actually.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of really, if you're looking at in terms of at least being like a premium kind of player, maybe not necessarily right out of the jump, but potentially, you're looking at someone in the draft. Obviously, Jalen Carter. Don't even know what to fully make, of him heading into the draft. There's a lot of question marks that, I don't have access to the information to, and we'll see if teams are able to get that. I really like the kid out of Pittsburgh, Kalijah
Kancey. I love it. I'm buying in. I'm buying into Kalijah Kancey.
I like him a lot. I
don't care about size. Who cares?
I feel, hey, if you want a guy who can kind of do some of the things or at least maybe potentially project to be like Javon Hargrave, I think that's kind of as close as a 1-for-1 that you're going to get in the draft.
I'm with you.
My last mock draft,
number 10. I had him.
If he's number 30, yeah, fine. Everybody loves him.
I got him taking him at number 10. I'm buying into it.
Might be a trade back for me from 10. Maybe like 10, you can trade back a couple of spots. Yeah, I think that's maybe where you might be able to make the value work. But there's a lot of snaps to replace here at defensive tackle because not just Hargrave, but Ndamukong Suh, Linval Joseph. Those guys were, especially by the end of the season, playing meaningful snaps. So you have a lot to replace there. And sure, you're going to get Mr. T back, Marlon Tuipulotu, and you still have Milton Williams and
Milton's
Jordan Davis.
Play a lot more than he did this past year.
Yes,
and I think Milton's a good player. He was playing well at the end.
I agree. But you still definitely need to add. They like to rotate their guys, and it's a new defensive coordinator. I get that, but I mean historically, they just like to rotate their defensive tackles, so they definitely need to add more bodies there.
At Brandon Gowton, make sure you follow BLG on Twitter. Bleeding Green Nation does a tremendous job there. I need you. I'm again going to go coin Jody. I need you to do me a favor right now. What's today's date? I don't even know.
Today would be the 27th.
March 27th, BLG. Please, we already talked about running back a little bit. Please end it right now. There is no freaking way the Eagles are taking Bijan Robinson at number 10. Can we just stop it?
I mean, I don't know how this can be. I mean, just you look at the track record, and to me, above all else, the Rashad Penny signing, like I was hinting at earlier, the fact that you can get this player who you can reasonably say, I think it's not unreasonable to be like, Rashad Penny can be one of the most productive players at his position, potentially, obviously there's health factor, next season. When you can get a guy like that for the little resources as the Eagles spent, I don't understand how the same GM, the same team is going to spend the number 10 overall pick. Number 30, it's a different conversation, but number 10, no way.
All right, so let me pose it to both of you since you went there, both did. And I love the conversation, but just the way certain people state it as if you could just wave a magic wand and make it happen. Not at number 10, but if you trade back to 15 or 16, then the value matches up. Oh, I get the line of logic, but then you have to have a dance partner. Somebody's got to agree to move up to number 10 and just happen to have 15 or 16 to be willing to do the deal. A lot easier said than done is the point I'm trying to make. And if everybody can do it, Howie can do it. But people sometimes think Howie can just make things happen by willing them. If that did happen, then they traded down to number 16 or 17. And the Pittsburgh DT is there and Bijan Robinson is there. Who are you taking with that pick?
Kancey. You have to also look at, it's just – you draft Bijan Robinson, he's going to be here 4 or 5 years. I mean, the Eagles are not going to pay a second running back contract. They're just not. They would have done it with Miles Sanders. Not to say that, Sanders is a better, player than what maybe Bijan Robinson can be, but that's just not, it's not how they operate. It's not what they do. Whereas in theory, you draft Kancey and look, I need to do more homework on these prospects as a whole, but I think there's more of a chance that he could be around for, let's say, 10 or more years, like Fletcher Cox has been, for example. So I think that's definitely what
I remember in the media house, BLG, talking to Howie about the 2018 draft. So after the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. So it was the Lamar Jackson year where they traded out, understandably so. Eventually got Dallas Goedert. So it worked out well for both teams. But, well, Baltimore's got some headaches, but it turned into a very good player for them. Mm-hmm. I asked him about the 50-year option. I remember, and he basically confirmed he doesn't even want a 50-year option at running back. That's part of the reason. He don't even want that. That's a big thing at quarterback. It's a big thing at certain positions, but that's not a positive at running back. I think, as you've seen with the Giants and Saquon Barkley, the Cowboys with Ezekiel Elliott, you're kind of forced to make that decision. Even if they were both good players, but the value is just not there. No. It's just not there at that position in this era. It used to be the position. Back in the old days, it was all running back. But now it's unbelievable how things have changed so much.
And I think you just look at how the Eagles can get less out of more of that position, like regularly. And the fact that they have such a good ecosystem for running backs in terms of their offensive line and a quarterback who runs a lot and can help the backfield in a lot of ways. I just don't think that's, if you're looking for, there's a salary cap. Your resources are limited. There's positions you're going to have to kind of not dedicate all of them to. And I think that's one that they can kind of get away with doing less with.
All right, BLG, last one for me. And I was going to bring this up with John in the first segment, but we got off on such a Edmonds fit position and the way the Eagles judge safeties tangent that I never got there. So let me run it by you. I think one of the under-the-radar needs that the Eagles have this offseason as we sit here today is wide receiver. And let me explain. We know that they've got maybe the best tandem of wide receivers in the National Football League. So what the hell do we need another wide receiver? Well, you're only one sprained ankle away from having Quez Watkins back as your number 2 wide receiver. And we saw that year one of Nick Sirianni, and it wasn't good enough. Devontae Smith taking a major step up. The A.J. Brown addition was phenomenal. But both of those guys stayed healthy all last year, and that's sometimes a bit of a pipe dream. Guys get hurt. Guys miss games. Guys sprain an ankle, miss 2 games. No Zach Pascal to go out there blocking on the outside and catch the occasional pass. Why? Because no one thinks they're actually going to throw it to him. But then he does make a play, and give him credit for it. Quez Watkins coming off a down year for me. Eagles, and do you like any of that? Devin Allen, is he going to step up this year and get the track stuff put behind him and become a reliable wide receiver? Britton Covey going to jump up and become a possession receiver? Am I overstating the case here, or do the Eagles need to address wide receiver here at some point?
No, they definitely need more depth behind the top 2 guys. I mean, you just said it, like, who is it right now behind those top 2? I mean, Quez Quez Watkins has ability in theory, but he really proved he couldn't be trusted late in the season. And where he's at currently, salary wise, he's set to make $2.7 million this year. And none of that's guaranteed at the time. It's the proven performance escalator that bumped his rookie contract up to that number. I think if I'm not mistaken, it's like the 18th highest cap hit on the team. I just don't think you can pay Quez Watkins that number. They have to either find a way to get him to take a pay cut or trade him. I just don't think you can keep him that's a high number. I don't think that makes a lot of sense, especially for a team that is tied up against the cap and should really be looking to find more ways to get some where they reasonably can.
Matt, you hate to think about it, but if you imagine AJ or Devontae going down with an injury, I mean, there is a chasm if you had to play somebody else. So, yeah, I do think, and they'll add a body. I do think Howie's going to trade down at some point, add picks in the middle rounds. They'll try to get somebody at that position. But you're right about Quez. Those performance escalators really kind of muck things up with players who play a lot. And, I'm not sure of that formula, but it values playing time more than effectiveness.
Yes, and we saw that with Rasul Douglas once upon a time. He actually had to take a pay cut, and then the Eagles cut him anyway. But I think there's going to have to be a conversation about that.
Where is Rasul Douglas, by the way?
Green Bay, playing well. Played well with Green Bay.
He wasn't eligible for free agency this offseason.
I do not believe so. I do not believe he signed a pretty big deal with Packers, didn't he? BLG, he's played well out there.
Yeah, he really has. I just didn't know if his deal was up. If he was, I didn't remember his name being kicked about his free agent. So apparently he's staying put with the Packers and is going to have to get along with our Aaron Rodgers, or maybe not. We shall see. BLG, great stuff. Always a pleasure. Appreciate whenever you jump in. Enjoy trying to ferret the nuggets out of the owners' meetings this week. We'll be reading you on Bleeding Green Nation.
See you guys.
Thanks,
bud. Lee Gowton here with us on Birds 365. All right, I want to further that conversation with you, Johnny Mack, when we come back. Because we know what the Eagles lost during the offseason, just football common sense tells you, all right, you lose guys, you have to replace guys. You have guys go via free agency, you got to bring free agents and or draft picks in. We're still more than a month away from the draft. They lost the wide receiver, too. I just mentioned they made no move at defensive tackle to replace Javon Hargrave. With whoever they bring in, it's going to be a massive drop-off. But you just need a body there to start the process. Even though I kind of poked a little fun at him last week. Zach Pascal did play for the Philadelphia Eagles. He got reps for the Philadelphia Eagles. He was on the field.
A lot of reps, yeah.
Somebody's got to get those reps. Yeah. There they do. And I've heard no rumors, no names kicked around about free agent wide receivers. Oh, by the way, there have been some free agent wide receivers signed. Whether they fit the type of
class, though, pre-agency of wide receiver, not the year to be looking for a wide receiver. Chicago got a good one.
Carolina got a guy like Adam Thielen on what I thought was a fair market.
He's expensive. Deal. They paid him a ton, and he's 32. That's not the. We talked about the Eagles aren't in that market. He was way too expensive.
So what market are they in?
$2 million. I mean, that's
less than what Zach Pascal was supposed to make. Well, he wasn't supposed to make.
Well, he got 2 years. I think the Eagles assumed they were going to get Zach back, but he got 2 years, so it's understandable why he left. I mean, I think it's a bigger loss than people realize. But but Thielen would be great. I mean, he was expensive. He was really, even at his age. I can look up the contract in the break, but he got a lot of money. So I certainly don't think they were in that type of conversation.
And I know that it's all about managing the cap, and we believe that Howie's good at it, but there is a need at the wide receiver position. And if we're just waiting for one to fall out of a tree for the veteran minimum, because that seems to be the type of contracts the Eagles are signing, I don't know that they're going to be able to scoop up that kind of guy. And here's another phrase that we use too often, that we just apply it and then you have to deal with the reality of it. Oh, well, they draft somebody. It's not going to be the first round. It probably won't be the second round, but the third round. Oh, by the way, the Eagles don't have, as of right now, a 4th, 5th, or 6th round pick. So in that 7th round where the Eagles have 2 picks, they're going to get an extra linebacker, an extra safety, at least an extra wide receiver, a developmental quarterback, a future running back. They only have 2 7th-round picks, and it's the 7th stinking round. So we're going to fill all these needs with our draft picks. As of right now,
but I mean, you also have to be realistic. So he got $25 million. I mean, $14 million guaranteed. I mean, you can't pay that for a 3rd wide receiver. And there, he's going to be a 1 or a 2, and they have some issues, obviously. You can't pay that kind of. Even if you didn't have to pay your quarterback, you can't pay that kind of money for a 3rd receiver. So you do have to be realistic as well, and that's where you do have to hit on some draft pick. It becomes more important, not only this draft, but also, Jody, last year's draft, when we talk about the luxury picks. All right, now Jordan Davis has got to ramp up. Now Nakobe Dean's got to ramp up. Now Cam Jurgens has got to ramp up. Those guys, and even to go back 2 years, Milton Williams, you talked about replacing Javon Hargrave. Well, he's the replacement. Now, he's not going to maybe get Cansey. You know, I'm buying the hype, and there's more avenues. But, you know, you're probably not going to be as good on the pass rush, but maybe Milton's a better run defender. He probably will be, to be honest. So maybe you got to go about things different ways. But, yeah, I mean, that's the trick to the whole thing. You have a certain amount of assets, and you got to put the pieces together. And Howie has proven to be, again, I'll say, top 5 at what he does. So he generally puts the pieces together better than others, to say the least.
All right, I'll give you Adam Thielen. He's a 1/2, and the Eagles are looking for a 3 at best. So they were priced out of that market. I certainly agree there. How about a return of the Mac Hollins, coming out of Vegas, landing with the Falcons for 2.5? Are you telling me he'd rather be a Falcon than an Eagle?
Well, I don't know. Maybe, because Mac got a lot of crap when he was here. So you never know a player's thoughts. But, yeah, I mean, he's a good blocker. He might be a bit. He's certainly improved. But, again, maybe he took so much heat when he was here. Maybe he doesn't want to be.
All right, how about another guy? Return to the Eagles. Nelson Aguilar signed this weekend. Why couldn't he be coming back into Philadelphia?
Nelson would rather dip himself in of acid than come back to Philadelphia.
All right, yeah, that one I kind of go with you. The wound should have healed on Mac Collins, who was not nearly as abused as Nelson Aguilar. All right, I get that. And Nelson wasn't coming back, but at least they were here before. And my point is, the Eagles still haven't added a wide. They've lost a wide receiver. I think they need to upgrade at wide receiver 3 over Quez Watkins to begin with. And to this point, Howie hasn't found any of those answers yet. He's McMullen. I'm McDonald. You get your Mac and Mac guys. Jeff Mosher's going to join us coming up in less than 20 minutes. So stay here with us on Birds 365.